All right, everybody. Adam and I are excited. We're here. We're trying our first Pump Club book club with a live conversation, and we want to thank Sahil for being here with us.
I
Thank
didn't
you,
know that this
sir.
was the first one. I now I'm honored.
We've done
You're
recorded
Previously,
ones, but we
you're the
haven't
first
done it.
live.
You're the first live. We've taken
okay.
questions beforehand and sat down and recorded, but we're doing this live with the village.
All right, well, I'll try to avoid doing anything too embarrassing then on live TV.
Mm, Way better, way better than
Makes
me.
it better.
I
So
wore my
books,
hat
I
just for
heard.
you guys.
For those of you
So
who can't read, we do have a lift heavy, run far, not fast. I got that wrong. Eat steak, repeat.
I figured it
so
was it was fitting.
I'll kick off by just explaining to everyone we chose the webinar format, so this isn't a total clusterfuck. Um, And we will, once Adam and I have a little bit of a conversation with Sahil, we'll open it up. You guys will raise your hands. Noah will promote you to panelists so you can be on camera and you can ask a question yourself. And we'll try to get to that as fast as possible because you don't want to be bored with us. Um,
Raise hand
so
not your bottom bar. Have you not done
yeah,
it before? If you
yeah,
scroll
don't actually just raise your hand. You need to press the raise hand button to be
if you're
100%
confused
clear.
why you're here or what you're doing, we are here to discuss the five types of wealth by Sahil himself. Everyone, hold
I'm
your book.
I'm
Look at
I'm
the-
the
Oh no,
unfortunate
no.
Noah. This is a total, you're fired,
First rule
unfortunately.
of book club is have the book.
Um, so I'll start out with I just have a an interesting question. First of all, I love the book and the whole idea of calculating the time left with people, I think is really important for everyone to get into. And we're not going to rehash it. I've heard you do podcasts that I love where you're rehashing that story again and again, but we're hoping everyone here read the book. Um, but one thing, and it's not a bone I have to pick, but it's something I want to chat through with you, because you talk about in the the physical health chapter, you talk about the importance of a morning routine. And this is something I used to be obsessed with too. Adam and I are friends with Tim Ferriss. I used to be all about, I wake up, do my cold plunge, meditate, do my workout, everything's done before 7. Now I'm a parent, and you can actually hear my daughter coughing behind me. Um, so she's homesick today. So the morning routine went out the window. And I think back on all that time when I had a morning routine, and my gut is I was burning stress to get that done in the morning. And right now I've shifted. I still do all the same things. I cold plunge. I do my mobility work for my lower back that I need to keep deadlifting. I walk 3 miles or ruck 3 miles a day. But it's more, I've morphed it as I've gone on to more of a daily checklist. It's not a morning thing because also when we launched the app, I was much busier. So that 5 to 7 a.m. time before my kids wake up became do customer service and work on the app before so I do the opposite of what the gurus. So I wanted to talk through for you what you think about people who are really busy people not focusing so much on when they do things, but having a non-negotiable list of things they crush throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I love this whole like meme that morning routines have become on the internet. Like, now it's like I think I saw a tweet the other day from a buddy of mine, Noah Kagan. He's the founder of this business, AppSumo, very successful guy, who was like, I can't wait for Andrew Huberman and Brian Johnson to have kids and to try to like maintain their protocols and morning routines with newborns. It's become like this thing of like the two ways to get likes on the internet. One is to like optimize and talk about all your optimization, and the other way is to dunk on people who are optimizing. And like those are basically the two ways that you can get a bunch of engagement. Look, my answer is sort of related to a meta concept in the book, which is this whole idea of dimmer switches that I talk about in the early part, which is to say that like The whole on-off mentality with all of these areas of life is probably one of the fundamental drivers of a lot of stress and challenges that we face. The reality is you can do exactly what you did, which is the dimmer switch. You said like, look, I'm in a different season of my life right now with little kids. I have a 2.5-year-old. I'm in the same boat. The things that I would have done in my like late 20s, or frankly, the things that I would do right now if I didn't have kids, relative to the things that I do right now with a 2.5-year-old, are very different. There's no, there's optimizing within the construct of your life and your environment and your conditions and the season that you're in right now. And the way that I have always thought about this is you don't need to adopt the principles that work for anybody else. You need to ideally consume the information, understand a certain level of what the research may say. That's what, frankly, like what I get from your newsletter a lot of the time is like the basic principles of the different research, the different things that are coming out into the world, and then put that through your own filter and adapt that into your life based on your current considerations. The idea of non-negotiables, the sort of checklist that you call it, I think is one of the simplest ways that we can all think about our lives. It is to say that, like, on a daily basis, there's 5 things that I just need to make sure that I get through in some way, shape, or form. But with the important note that I can never allow optimal to get in the way of beneficial. I think that's one of the big challenges we all face as ambitious people. And it shows a level of maturity to grow through that, to say that when we're young, I think most of us, especially us like optimizers, right? Like if you're on a call like this, if you're reading a book like this, you probably are an ambitious person. You probably are an optimizer in some way, shape, or form. And the challenge that we face is that we allow optimal to get in the way of beneficial. We say, I don't have an hour to work out today, so I'm just not going to work out. I don't have 2 hours for deep work, so I'm going to do email instead. I don't have an hour to call this person, so I'm just going to not even text them. And the challenge is when you're doing that, you're fundamentally halting your compounding engine in all of these areas of life. You're shutting off compounding. The reality is anything above zero compounds. Anything above zero compounds mathematically. So doing the tiny thing, doing the 15-minute walk on a day when all hell broke loose, your kid kept you up all night, and you're clearly not going to get a workout in, is better than doing nothing. Adam actually is one of the people that taught me that. Like a few years ago, I was deep in my like optimization life arc, and he was one of the people that was talking to me about he had young kids. He was like, now I know that like if I can just get 20 minutes in the gym to hammer out like a circuit of goblet squats and swings and one other thing, that's all I need to like continue marching the ball forward. And that is a really big unlock for your stress and anxiety in life. To recognize that like I've built this base, I've done all of these things, and even if I haven't, the little things are going to stack wins in the right direction. Small things become big things in all of these areas of life if you allow time to be the lever, if you allow it to just continue to stack.
I love that because well, you say don't let optimization get in the way of beneficial, but Arnold always says don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. Same
Totally.
exact thing. He always tells people one beats a zero. You basically sound like Arnold, but you're missing the accent right now.
Missing the accent, missing the muscle, missing the success, missing all
Yeah.
of the things.
Touch some
But
of
I
the
could sound
muscle.
like him. That's great.
Uh, it's an important thing that what you mentioned relates to a lot of the advice that we talk about with fitness and nutrition as well. People are constantly talking and asking questions about what do I do with my diet? What do I do with my training? Especially when people want to gain muscle or lose fat. And Arnold says don't overthink it, right? He talks about adjusting the dial, which is the same concept that you brought up with the dimmer switch. And I think it's so important that we can so easily overthink as opposed to if I'm adjusting the dial, what are these small changes that I can do repeatedly that, right, exponentially add value? So I think for people who are listening that are familiar with Arnold's just adjust the dial mentality, that is exactly what you were mentioning with the dimmer switch.
Yes. Yeah. It's yeah, exact same concept. And I just think look, I mean, this relates to just like a broad meta point that I really think is important to understand, which is um, you are told over and over again in your life that you can just do things later. Like we say, I'll spend more time with my kids later. I'll, focus on my health later. I'll prioritize my relationship with my partner, my friends later. I'll find freedom and purpose later, whatever the thing is. The sad thing is that later just becomes another word for never in all of these areas of life because those things are not going to exist in the same way later. I mean, you and I have young kids. All of us have kids here right now, actually. And like your kids are not going to be 5 years old later. Your partner won't be there for you later if you're not there for them now. Your health certainly won't be there for you if you don't invest in it now. And what that means is we all need to adopt that turn the dial down or the dimmer switch mentality, because we can design those tiny investments into our lives today, because anything above zero compounds. The reason I like morning routines, to wind back to your point, Daniel, is because I fundamentally believe that life gets chaotic as the day goes on. And so the best way to make sure that you get something done consistently is to do it first thing in the day. That's the only reason I do a morning routine, the only reason I care or I think that they're valuable for people is simply because of the recognition that life gets super fucking, excuse my language, super chaotic as the day goes on. Emails, work, family stresses, kids, whatever it is, it's much easier to build a consistent habit when it's the first thing that you do. And so anytime I'm trying to get into something new, too, by the way, like I realized, just a silly example, but like for the last 3 years while I worked on this book, I kind of stopped reading. I used to read really broadly. I was big on like grab a book that interested me and I would just read. And I was so focused on like research for the book and then writing that I kind of lost the love of the broad reading. And so I was like, I'm going to get back into that. I'm done with the book. It's out in the world. I'm going to get back into it. And so what I did was I put on my calendar a 30-minute window. And I'm an early morning person, so this isn't a flex. I go to bed super early. But like from 4:30 to 5 in the morning, I'm just gonna read for 30 minutes. And it's not gonna be like about reading something valuable. It's just gonna be whatever grabs me. So like I was reading this book on physics this morning, Carlo Rovelli, like little like physics lessons, because I'm kind of interested in time and space and whatnot. Um, but I'm doing it first thing in the morning and it's structured into my day. Not because I'm trying to be a tough guy and a badass, but because I know that if I'm trying to build the consistency, it has to be there, because I know I won't do it at 4:30 when my son's screaming or he's upset or he wants to go play and I want to go do that with him.
That's 100. And by the way, I hate the word privilege, but it's kind of like a part of this for me is I do push these things off. Is there is a little bit of privilege. I built a fitness habit for 15 years. So if you're building a habit, I definitely see the value of doing
Mhm.
it before you do anything else. But mine's built, so that's part of why I can be like, I'll get it done at lunchtime
That's a
today.
good point.
And the further you get into things, I think the more freedom you have when they're really cemented. But you're right. That's a great way to look at it. If you guys are starting out, do it in the morning. Adam,
I think the 4:30 a.m. is less of a flex than the fact that you're reading physics. I'd be reading like
yeah,
It's
I
not a
agree.
flex physics. If you read this book, you will see that it's not a flex on physics. It's this guy Carlo Rovelli, who's kind of like, it's basically like, think like physics for dummies. I mean, you can see how thin this is.
right.
But it's kind of like, without having to do all the math, it's like giving you the basic understanding of like the crazy shit that has happened in the world of physics over the last 100 years, and like mind bending stuff about time and space. I just find that kind of stuff really interesting.
I
My
got
flex is I went to bed at 8:15 last night. I just checked.
That's a flex.
I go to bed at 8:15 every night, by the way. Like
Me
when I
too.
say that I wake up early, like on a Friday night, my like happiest place is when I can get into bed at 7, my son's asleep, and we can like watch our show together. That's what
We're
life
the
has
same
become.
here.
Yeah.
Seven
At
o'clock, kids
8:15,
are in bed, and we settle down.
at 8:15, I just have put my children to bed, and I'm now sitting down to review the next day's newsletter and make sure that everything is gonna.
And he knows I'm not texting back.
And I already know if there's something wrong and I need to get a hold of Daniel Ketchel, it's not happening because his
He's
phone, his
out.
notifications let me know that he's not going to respond, and he's just flexing that he's already asleep. Uh, so you were kind enough when you sent this to me to tab and mark certain pages for me. And I think, when we listen to the tons of people who bought the book, right, from the pump, the one general consensus is people are loving it. And the primary question that we've seen from a lot of people is this thing is stacked, right, with a lot of advice, a lot of practical wisdom, a lot of things that people have heard, but put in a doable, actionable form so that people can go ahead and start applying to their life. That is both good, as in I can do it, and it creates another frustration of, right, if we've got this idea of the dimmer and focus on saying, where do I start? And everyone's going to be a little bit different, but I think it might be helpful to hear if you were to create tabs for yourself, for your own book, where did you look in terms of starting making some of these adjustments, whether it's to the social health or to the physical health or to right at the actual like the accumulation? How did you look at your own life, and maybe what can people learn from that as they then try and look at themselves and like where do I start to make application? Because sometimes there is that thing of right the paralysis by analysis where they're
Hmm.
seeing all these things they could do and they get excited and then it's just like, oh shit, where do I start? Because if they try and do all of it, it's
Yeah.
not gonna happen.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest struggles that we all have now is that we're getting too much of our dopamine from information gathering. Um, that's the dopamine you get when you read Atomic Habits and you say, I'm good at habits now.
Right.
But you haven't done anything yet. You haven't actually acted on the information that you gathered. And what you find with really successful people over and over again is that they have a razor thin gap between information and action, between gathering the information and acting on that information. And so, what I really want people to do when they read the book is yes, you're getting a lot of information, but go take some tiny action on one thing. Because that's what starts to create the momentum. That's what actually then will create the ripple effects. The first thing I did, and I mean, the book it's not about me, but it is a manifestation of my journey in a lot of ways to, redefine my own scoreboard in life. Um, the most important concept for that in my mind is the life raiser concept, this idea that's in the upfront section of the book of creating this ripple creating identity defining rule or statement for your life, that of how your ideal self shows up in the world during this season of your life. That idea is the one that I think like carries over into every other thing that's in the entire book because it defines in one simple statement how your ideal self is going to show up in this period where you are. And I think for people to sit with that, and anyone, by the way, that has bought the book or does buy the book, if you send me an email, sahil@sahilbloom.com. We should probably put this actually next time you guys send out an email as a follow up to this, or we can put it in the app. If you send me an email with your receipt, I'll send you this companion workbook that we created. It's like a 50-page workbook that kind of goes deeper on some of those exercises. The Life Raiser is one of the primary exercises it goes deeper on to just give you space to actually ideate, brainstorm, to come up with yours. Because I think that one is the one idea that really does have ripples and sort of creates that clarity in your mind around everything else.
I think we should open it up pretty soon. But again, you sound like a mini Arnold right now because his whole thing is find your vision first and decide who you want to be, not what you want to be. And that's the life raiser in action, really. But I think we should open it up, don't you, Adam?
Yeah. So if you have questions for
Click
Sahil,
raise hand, and Noah will make you a panelist.
you will be visible,
Noah, you can go on camera so we can see you.
or preferably have clothing on.
Noah, are you getting us someone? All right, Craig. Craig, you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I didn't even know that was not on. um, there we go.
There you go.
There we go.
What's your question?
So, two things. Just genuinely, this is probably the one you hear the most. But your how many hours you've got left to see your relative, how many times you'll see them, that got me in seconds. And I do mean seconds. Like in a few weeks, if it happens, I don't know if it will, but if it happens, I'll have my mum and brother and sister in my house, and that'll be the first time that's ever happened. All those people in one place at one time.
Man,
Which when I say that out loud is ludicrous, but that's literally never happened. So that's on you.
that's
That
amazing.
was as the book was in one hand, the messages were being sent on the other. And now that just
Made my day. Thank you.
yeah. Second thing, the sort of life rule, it worked. Man, really quickly that just worked for me. I instantly in my head I thought a rule, be the sort of man I want my son to be. Simple as that. And that's made me do things I didn't want to do all week, Um, I ended up doing MMA sparring the other day, got savagely beaten. But I was there because I didn't want my son to be the one that did not turn up, right? So that again, two of those things I got from reading your book last week. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that one on having that rule, by the way, I highly recommend, once you kind of come up with it, just like write it on a card, a note card or something, and like put it on your desk. I've actually thought about making like little like calligraphy cards or something like that, where you can like get one custom made to just put on your desk, like a little frame. I want to get like a little frame of mine. Mine is, I will coach my son's sports teams, as you saw in the book. And I just want to have it in front of me, because what I find is like awareness is great, but it's only as good as your ability to actually have it in the moment when you need it. Like it's no good for me to have it right now. I'm in a pretty aware state. I'm talking to guys that get it. Like I'm in that moment, but I need it when it's tested. Like I need it when my son barges in here while I'm focusing on something and I'm complaining and I'm super annoyed and like I want him to leave and I'm like, why is he doing this? Or I need it when like the opportunity comes across my desk that's going to require me to travel for 20 nights out of the month, but it's going to pay me a lot of money. I need it in those moments, and having it in front of you just visually to be able to look at and snap yourself back, I think would be really valuable.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think my question I was going to ask, so I've almost become sort of unbalanced the other way around. So I was a manager at a team, my job, and I let that go. And I was doing a PhD, and I stopped doing that because we adopted my son, and I decided that's priority, right? That's more important than the other things, and that was a good move, and I'm proud of that. But 3 years later, now I find myself, I don't know if this makes sense, but dad and husband guilt keeps me in the house when I could be doing things for me. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And that I find myself struggling. It's gone, it's
Yeah,
flipped,
I get
if
it.
that makes sense. You know, I'm not being that guy that's out looking after myself and ignoring the family, but now I'm probably being that guy that's not doing, that's going to go wrong the other way if I don't find a way past that. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, no, I get it. I think that uh, the thing that I often think about with it applies to both work and then also just like taking care of yourself in different ways, is the traditional wisdom that we've received and the sort of the default setting on this is the phrase of like balance, where we're like work life balance or whatever the thing might be. And what we do when we say that is that we place the two things in tension, right? We assume through the statement that the two are opposites and we need to balance them on this, on this weight scale. And that doesn't actually have to be the case. If you actually just question that idea and peel it back, that's not really true. Work and life don't have to be in balance. Your personal ambitions don't have to be in tension with your life, with your family, with your kids, with all of those things. They can actually be in harmony. They can actually kind of come together in a certain way. The reframe that I have had that's allowed me to do that, which I didn't write about in the book, is this concept of life missions that you sort of get to choose a couple of life missions, like a few things that are kind of your big picture missions that you are on in life. And you get to choose the people that are on those missions with you. I have like used that as a framing with my wife and with my son for kind of everything that we are doing and working on. So when I talk about my book or when I talk about sort of the stuff that I'm working on, I really think of it as a mission that my wife and son are a part of. So when I am traveling or when I'm doing something, I frame like, yes, that is part of my ambition to go and create, to go create value, to go and do these things. But my wife and son are a part of that. And they know that in the way that we talk about it, in the way that I interact with them around it. They know that they are actually a part of this mission that we are all working on together. So rather than for me when I travel, it feeling like, oh, it's in this tension with my presence in the moment with them, it is a thing that we are all on together. That it's part of this mission that is really important to us. That like kind of subtle reframe, and in the way that I communicate that, in the way that we communicate around it as a family, has helped enormously because it's removed the guilt that I feel when I'm pursuing things that are truly core to that mission. Now, if it's me chasing some random shiny object that has nothing to do with our core mission, I should probably question it and feel some of the guilt, but that's a separate story. The thing when it's core, when it's really part of what I'm trying to do and this core ambition and this mission that we're on, I don't need to feel that guilt because they're on that mission with me.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's something to think about. It's a hard reframe that, but I can see the value of that definitely.
Thank
Excellent.
you, Craig.
Greg, thanks for the questions.
Noah, you got the next one?
What do you got up next? It's like
That was a
this.
great question, by the way.
That
Um,
was
and for anyone on,
I,
yeah, send me
oh,
an email. Like if you have follow-up questions or anything that comes up, or you're wrestling with
and
these
you guys
ideas.
can all ask in the app too, because
Yeah,
Sahil's in the
yeah,
app.
We'll share with everyone too the way to get these workbooks that
yeah,
Sahil
yeah. Do
mentioned.
that. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
we'll do that too.
I do
And
that
I
in the
just want to throw in one more thing because a lot of you have asked Arnold similar questions about finding balance. And similar to Sahil, Arnold doesn't really believe in balance, which is pretty clear looking at his life. But his method is always you do one thing at a time. So when you're with your he doesn't have balance because he says when you're with your family, when you're sitting with your kids at dinner, you're 100% with your kids. You're not on your phone. You're not thinking about work. When you're working, you're 100% working. And that's why Arnold always tells us, and I've been lucky, I've been indoctrinated in that for 20 years, is it is much more effective when you're 100% on whatever you're doing than when you're 50-50.
And he gets super granular on that, right? Daniel gets to see where he always kind of has Arnold's attention because Daniel runs Arnold's life as his chief of staff, right? My work primarily is with everything in the pump and a few other projects, but when I want Arnold's attention on something with the pump, if he's right filming a movie, or if he's working on a speech with Ketchel, or if he's dealing with gerrymandering issues or problems with the environment, he's not going to respond to an email. He's not going to react to a FaceTime because that is what he's doing. He is so myopically focused on what he's doing in that moment. And then I call it like a revolving door. When it comes, his attention is completely with me. I don't have to worry about another distraction. But then once that door goes, you have to wait till his attention comes back. So he doesn't just focus on family versus work. When he's on that one thing, he gives his attention
He's
fully.
Yeah,
he's the least uh he's the most one thing at a time guy I've ever met.
yeah. I think that's a great thing to aspire towards. I like to say that I'm that way, but I would, if I'm being truly self-aware, um, I would say it's like maybe a quarter of the time I actually live by it. It's very hard. I mean, we are massively addicted to our phones. And for anyone whose job is sort of tied to their phone in some way, it is so difficult. And sometimes it feels like a pipe dream that it's like I have to reach a certain level of achievement to be able to do that. And I constantly remind myself that like that is this like if then statement that is not true. It is fundamentally like I'm using it to cope, to say that like, oh, it's fine that I'm on my phone around my family because I need to do this to get to there. When in reality, I would do much better at whatever it is that I'm doing on my phone if I was just focused on it where in my office, and my phone just stays in my office. And I just need to create a rule around that, frankly, to just hold myself to the fire on it, because I'm not as good about that as I should be. The other one thing that I'll say before we take Brandon's question, what's up, Brandon? Is sometimes you have to go through seasons of unbalance in order to unlock seasons of balance, and that's okay. I think that balance as a concept has sort of been hijacked, which is to say that you've been told that you need to have a perfect balance on a daily basis. Like every day has to be a perfect blend of health and personal life and family and work and whatever journaling. Like it has to be a perfect balance. Otherwise, you got to get stressed and anxious that you're not in. Oh my God, my life's not in balance, and then it creates stress that you're not in balance, which is a self-fulfilling vicious cycle. Um, the reality is that sometimes your life is just not going to be balanced, and that is actually in service of a future season of balance. Balance is much more about the seasons than it is about the days. I have just come through a 4 to 6 month absolute terror sprint on getting this book out into the world, sharing the ideas. Really important to me, part of my purpose, an extraordinarily important mission to me. That was a season of unbalance. I mean, I was on the road 5 times more than I want to be in the long run if I were to zoom out, but it was important. It was a season of unbalance in service of a future season of balance. But you need to have the recognition, like what the point of it was, that I want that season of balance to come so that you can make sure you zoom out and you don't get caught in this, consistent season after season of unbalance, thinking that it's always for some future.
That's great. I also want to be clear. I'm not 100% at this either. Arnold's a machine. All of us are trying to be like that. But my wife still has to tell me at dinner sometimes, like, step away from the table if you're going to look at your phone right now. You can look at it, you can work, but you need to walk out of the room, not in front of the kids, which has been a great rule.
Yeah, she tells
Let's
me
go
all
to
the time,
Brandon.
I'm not that important, and I'm like, good reminder. Brandon, you are on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Good. Well, nice. Thanks for having me on. It's kind of dovetailing what you guys were talking about, but my life was good until I read this damn book. 'Cause I, I, God, I've screwed everything up. So, but I guess where I want to start is it had to do with, it was on page 81 about scattered attention versus concentrated attention. You guys were just talking a little bit about that. So I did pick up some stuff, but I guess my question was, one, super good analogy. So thank you with the magnifying glass, like concentrated, So I get that in theory, but I'm a mortgage advisor. And so my reputation has kind of been, business has been built on responding quickly and right away and really good communication, which means I'm scattered constantly. So I'm good at my business, but like with my wife and my kids and everybody else. So I guess my question is, at what point do you temper your ambition? Okay. Well, that's I don't even know what to say, but it's an interesting, I don't know the word, dichotomy, but basically it's like, how do I get from, in theory, I'm like that on and off switch. Okay, I get it. I'm just going to be off my phone. But that's not balanced because then
Yeah.
I go.
Yeah.
So the concentrated attention, I love it. So maybe you could tell me what you do maybe on a daily basis just to strive for that. Is there a
Yeah.
practical way to do it?
Brandon,
This
can
is
I ask one clarifying question, then I'll let you answer it, Sahil? Is there something that you're worried about? Like, what are you worried about the current path that you're on, right? Because like every time we want to, right, make an adjustment to our life or we see something better, it's usually because we're trying to drive towards something that we don't have, or we're trying to avoid something that we don't want to run into. Is there one of, are you trying to drive to something different or trying to avoid to a certain outcome? So just so we can make sure that the advice that we give is particular to what it is that you're trying to move towards.
Yeah, I'm just afraid of epic failure. Um, so it's like, so in my business, I work with real estate agents, and so you have close of escrows, I'm the mortgage finance guy. So you don't respond, they move on to somebody else. So I guess my concern is I'm constantly checking my phone or verifying it. So if there's a question or something, I respond quickly. So I guess my question is, at what point do I just not respond so I can give attention to other things and sacrifice that business? I guess that's my fear. It's like I'll go.
Yeah. I this is a similar fear and response that I would say that I get from a lot of people in finance and professional services. Um, legal profession, consultants, bankers, investors, etc. It's very, very similar because there's this feeling that, yes, my reputation is sort of staked on me being like immediate response, thoughtful, get back to people. There's two things I would say. Number one, um, go through the course of the week and just sort of like make mental notes running your normal week of how you normally do, getting back to things really quickly, etc. And make a mental note of how many of the things that came up were like truly urgent, truly like the response in that moment was sort of necessary, and how many of them were like a kind of altered state of urgency that I think a lot of us do create around certain work things. When I was in my finance, so I spent the first 7 years of my career working at a private equity fund. I was working in finance. I once swerved off the road on the highway to answer an email that I had just gotten from one of the partners because I was like, this has to get responded to right now. Like swerved off the road, drove onto the side embankment and pulled out my computer, pulled on a hotspot and responded to an email. Fake urgency is one of the greatest risks that we all create in our lives. Like we convince ourselves everything is urgent, and when everything is urgent, nothing is truly urgent. We like everything. The idea of like everything is important, nothing's important. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. That applies. So ask yourself that question during the course of the week. The second thing I would say, in what I normally advise people to do, and what I did, was try to create just like batched windows when you're going to be truly dialed in on that one thing. So if that thing is responding to emails or texts or messages that you get, create like 5 windows during the course of the day. It sounds like you need to do that a lot. That's a core part of your work. Same as any professional service. You can't tell a banker, hey, respond to emails once a day, right? That might be what Arnold does. That might be what I do now. Like I have a 1 hour window when I'm replying to emails. I couldn't have done that when I was an analyst working at a private equity fund, right? I would have gotten fired. So you can do like 5 of those windows, but like truly batch them where you're like, I'm going to be super dialed in on that one thing of replying to these. What that means is that like at most there's going to be like an hour where something would have had to wait an hour to get responded to, but when you respond to it, you're going to have been really locked in, concentrated on what you were focusing on during that window. You weren't going to be grabbing from attention in different directions and pulling you. That improves the quality of your response. The outcomes actually really do improve, and you get it all done more efficiently. Like Parkinson's law is this thing I talk about in the book, right? Like work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. You give yourself an hour to do emails, you'll get through your emails more efficiently and at a higher quality level in that hour than you ever would have if you allowed them to be like a thing that you were doing on the side all day. So I would challenge you to try something like that. See if you can create windows during the day when you're going to be concentrated attention, magnifying glass, but on that activity that you're currently allowing to be the entire day.
I'd
And if it
I'd
doesn't
also
work for you, it doesn't work for you, by the way. Like, test it. It's not saying that this is the perfect answer, but test it and see what happens. Like, the worst case scenario, you don't like it and you've tried it for 3 days and that was what it was.
I also want to chime in on the fake urgency thing because I came up in politics, and everything in politics is like right now, right now, right now. And one time toward the end of my time, in Arnold's time too, in the governor's office, we were literally like at a lunch sitting with the former president of the United States. And this will age me or date me, but I pulled out my BlackBerry and I started like typing, and Arnold looked at me and went, what are you doing? And I said, well, there's a fire. And he said, is that going to put the fucking fire out? And I realized like I was conditioned, if you didn't respond within 5 minutes to the chief of staff or the head of emergency services, that was a big disaster. But I realized it doesn't actually do anything. I'm just making up that it like I'm in trouble if I don't send it. If I send this in an hour, they're not going to notice.
And then Brandon, I got another question. Do you have a family, wife or kid? Yeah. So when I hear that, right, the context is so interesting. When you're like, I'm afraid of failure, right? A lot of people might think like, oh, failing at the job. But I also hear failing as a husband or failing as a father. And what might help there is that there might always be a level of needing to be on. But what does it mean to be on for your family? And having that conversation of like, how do they feel that they're the top priority? Because I'm similar to you, where multiple businesses and growing the pump is a we love it, right? We love what we're doing, but it's a huge demand when we've got the newsletter and the podcast and the app and constantly evolving and other things that we're doing in order to help more people. That, as Sahil talked about, there's these seasons of unbalance, and it doesn't always look the way that you want. But what you can do is find out what are the things that you can do for your family so that they know that they're still the top priority, even if the amount of time you spend with them is somewhat asymmetrical to the amount of time you need to be doing work. So we joke with my wife that she has what we call the bat phone. Right. So like old Batman, Adam West Batman, you have the bat phone, the red bat, that like where if she wants me, if she needs the bat phone, she pulls it out and you don't do it all the time. She knows I'm there. There have been times where I've had to travel. I'm literally going to get on a plane like the next day and she's like, I need you home. This happened when we had a kid. And it's just like when she pulls the bat phone, does she know, even at a sacrifice to me, that I am there? If she needs to have a conversation, the newsletter isn't written. Do I mean that I'm gonna have to stay up really late in the middle of the night? And those things matter because it builds more slack into the system to ensure that you're not failing them, where you don't necessarily have a life that looks like everyone else. I think the the great facade is that like there's this should, right? Like our life should look a certain. No, your life is whatever works for you. I am sure that I know for a fact my relationship with my wife and kids is different than Daniel's and with his wife and his two kids, and I know it's different than Sahil with his wife and his son. But we all have an understanding of what our significant other or what our children need. And as long as we prioritize that, even if there's a give and take, that if we do the thing we say we're going to do, it ensures, at least on the family side, that we're not going to fail. So it makes it easier to not fail with work. So don't just think of it like, what do I have to do or what am I giving up? Or I think the idea of the magnifying glass is that, like, don't just get the magnifying glass for what you're focusing on. Understand what matters to these people. So then if the question is like, what am I doing? Are you doing the thing that you know is going to be super meaningful to them?
You
Yeah,
also,
that's good. Thank you.
I want to just say you triggered a compliment I meant to give Sahil. I've read a lot of these books and they're all like Marcus Aurelius said this, Theodore Roosevelt said this. The magnifying glass thing reminded me I meant to compliment you. I just love that there are like Toy Story tidbits in the middle of it as lessons. It just made my 40-year-old self incredibly happy.
I really enjoyed trying to get my illustrator to create an image of the Toy Story rocket. I mean, you can tell I have a 2.5-year-old kid. I had
Yeah.
literally, like, when I was drafting that at the very end, that was that very end of the book writing process. I had probably watched Toy Story 270 times in the like month leading up to it. And I was like, that's a really good analogy for what I'm trying to get across. I wonder if I should just include this.
Yeah. I have to work Lion King into everything I do
Yeah,
right
we
now.
got to do it.
All right, Noah, let's get the next one. Thanks, Brandon. And guys, we got about 15 more minutes.
Try and grab maybe two more questions from people.
Yeah.
Talk radio. I love this.
Dan, you're up. Unmute yourself though. There you go.
We good now? Can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Sahil, I want to touch on a point, and please correct me if I misunderstood the beginning of the book where you opened up talking about your career in finance and pivoting. Um, did part of that, and I think you touched on that just now as your question with Brandon, was part of that pivot not just to fulfill the family pieces you talked about, you know, as you had that conversation with your friend about seeing your parents 15 more times before you die? Was another piece of that career pivot, um, where you talked about, Adam just touched on, husband, fatherhood, failure. I think a lot of us men, have those feelings. So was part of that pivot in that space as well, where maybe the work didn't seem fulfilling as you kind of started to open your mind up to some of these concepts?
Yes. Um, I I always hesitate, and I wasn't as explicit in the book as I would say that I would be, like with friends. Partially because I bear zero ill will towards anyone that I was working with or around. I loved my colleagues, actually, the partners, the firm. Um, it was very much like my priority set and my focus had grown so narrow on, money being the like conditional thing for me being happy and like getting rid of my insecurities that I'd had since I was a kid. And that led to me operating in a way that was not in line with my values as a human being. Was not the, man, father, friend, son, brother like that I should have been because I was so focused on this one thing. And I realized by that point in my life that like I needed to find a different path that allowed me to be all of those things in the way that I wanted to be and that I knew that I was capable of being. Um, and along that, I think that a big part of your life is what you work on and what you spend time on a daily basis. And so doing something that sort of unlocked me to kind of like march toward the true north that I actually had a vision for in my own life, which is trying to create an impact. I didn't care. I don't really care about money. And so I had like defaulted into this whole path without actually thinking about the fact that like I didn't really care about all those things. I had just accepted by default this like thing that people told me was going to make me feel successful, when in reality, I really define my own success now and as a human being around the ripples that I can create in the world, and hopefully being a positive force in other people's lives. And so the switch and the pivot that I had was sort of all encompassing in that way. I mean, I really saw a vision of like what my life was going to look like if I continued to march down the path that I was on. And if I'm being fully transparent, it was going to end up that I was divorced, that, all of these other areas of my life were really, my relationship with my sister was going to be broken. I wasn't going to see my parents a whole lot. My dad, unfortunately, is not doing great health wise. And all these things were really going to break if I just continued to play out that path that I was on. My wife and I were struggling to conceive at the time. We'd been like for 2 years at that point. And, I saw where all of that was headed if I didn't make a change into the one thing. And I found that that was the lever point. It was like, okay, here it is. Here's the lever point. Make this big switch. And I'm very lucky that we did.
The other part I want to ask, because I think it interties. I apologize that I haven't completely finished the book yet. I have to
No, you're
keep
good.
stopping, take notes, meditate, and come back because there's so much heavy stuff in there. But going through the social wealth area, I'm wondering, have you noticed a pivot in your close community that as you've shifted into these different areas? Has your community or what you've either grown into or found, has that shifted as well?
Yeah, enormously. I mean, one of the saddest things that happens when you are going through your own kind of personal growth and transformation is that you realize that a lot of the people that you previously considered to be like your friends uh, are not really your friends. And they were sort of environment or context dependent. And a lot of the people that I really thought were like real friends and supported me, including a couple of my, bosses, I was sort of like I was done when I was leaving. I was done. I no longer had utility in whatever way, and most of them thought I burned out. They thought like they truly like um, it was like I no longer spoke the same language as them in certain ways, and that was friends, colleagues. The guy was a lot mentors. I had a mentor who told me he thought it was gonna be the worst decision I ever made when and it was like a mentor, a real person that I looked up to. I sent him a copy of the book a few weeks ago, letting him know that it was a New York Times bestseller. I'm petty like that sometimes. But look, I mean, I think that periods of loneliness are a tax on personal transformation, meaning they are quite literally the cost of entry for the change that you are trying to create in your life. You are going to change. Your environment has not changed. You are not going to speak the same language as people that you previously considered to be your environment, your people. And you have yet to attract the new people on the other side of that change. So there's this period where it really does just feel like you're on your own. You have yet to attract those new people. Recognizing that as the cost of entry, recognizing that that is a period that everyone has to go through as they create a big change in their life, and tying yourself to your few sort of roots, like those few people that are truly there with you across all of that change during that window. That's where I think your center is really found.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, Noah, let's get one more. Thanks, Dan.
Periods of loneliness are a tax on personal transformation.
Good line.
I wrote a newsletter like maybe a year or two ago on like, or maybe it was like maybe not even a year ago. Time is kind of flying by on like taxes on life, which is a riff on a Marcus Aurelius line, Daniel. I think Marcus Aurelius, maybe
I love
Seneca.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, yeah.
I just love Toy Story
But I
too.
kind of like went through like what are some of those different taxes. I've heard Ryan Holiday talk about that in the past too. Maybe it was in Daily Stoic that I originally saw it actually, and then kind of wrote a piece riffing on it.
It's great. All right, so all right. Do you have a question?
Hi there. I do have a question. I haven't gotten the book yet. Definitely planning on getting it now. This has been a wonderful panel. Great questions. I have a bit of a tack on the last things that were said regarding the loneliness period, and begun to accept that in the last year as I've gone through these radical changes with my life. No need to really go into that, but you reach that point where you understand the peers that they're not your peers anymore, like was said here. And, you know, while I do have a few people close to me as far as the 4 people, what are some tips or tricks any of you really have for fighting off that sense of loneliness, that sense of, is this worth it? Or the validations that we're socialized where we need others cheering and approval to find our way, you know, if that makes sense.
I'm curious, Daniel and Adam, what you guys think. One of the biggest things for me was during that period, uh, I made a real pointed effort, and I still do, to spend more time in uh, quote unquote value aligned rooms. I write about this in the book. In the social wealth section, I have this thing called the anti networking guide, which is like sort of principles for like building genuine relationships as an adult. No one teaches you how to make new friends as an adult. It's like one of my big lamentations of life. It's like, you know how to make friends as a kid. You're in school, you do all these things. When you're an adult, no one tells you. The thing that was a big unlock for me was like, I'm gonna figure out, okay, what are my core values? Well, one of them is like delayed gratification. I really believe in like the people that I end up getting along with most are the people that I know embrace the idea of like doing a hard thing now in order to build a better thing later. What are places where I'm gonna find a lot of people that have that shared value? Gyms are a great one, like fitness community. And so I started, when I was feeling that feeling of loneliness, I was like, I'm going to kind of immerse myself within the world of like fitness. So I like went to a couple, health business summits. I, joined a local gym where I was like, meet the local people, spend time with them. And so it was a period where I was like, yes, I wasn't deep and close with these people, but I felt like they were my type of people. And so it made me feel less lonely during that period, because I just like, I was around people that were sort of in that same energy and mindset as me. And that could be anything. Like I'm saying it as gyms, but like if you're into art, like go to look on Groupon and like find what the local, art events are, or like museum openings or book clubs, or like if you're into health and wellness stuff, farmers markets are a great place, or like dog parks if you're into dogs. Like there's always kind of these shared spaces that you can find, where you're going to find people that are similarly valued to you. And when you're around people that kind of share those like big picture values on life, it doesn't mean they share every single belief or understanding about the world, but they share the big picture. You will feel less lonely during those periods.
I'm sure it'll feel more valid, and it's a good point because then you get the layers of both people with similar goals and drives. And it's kind of like when we let go of those friends of our past, we love them, but they're not doing anything. And it's like you are what you eat. The company you keep, yay, nay, inspiration or not. So it kind of falls all into that. Thank you for that.
I,
That's a good idea. I
I,
the gym, and I'm also an artist, so I look locally.
I do think the point Sahil made in the last question, if you do have those anchors still, I think that's so important to you. Like the people who stuck with you, like no matter what I've done, and my situation's quite a bit different because my situation is more, I work for Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I have to sift through who's my actual friend and who wants access,
Yeah,
right?
the
So this
social
is,
clout nonsense is in your past too.
it's a different situation, but no matter what, I've always had my anchors. Like my college roommates and I are talking every single day, mostly in a text group, mostly not in a way the positive corner of the internet would love, but every single day, and they're
What else
reminding
is a group
me,
chat for, by the
yeah,
way?
and they're reminding me every day that like when all these other people pretend they want to be my friend to get access, they're reminding me every day I'm not shit. So like I think those anchors you really have to hold on to. And the last thing I'll say before Adam chimes in and closes us out is I do think like one of the things Adam and Arnold and I talk about that we love about the pump is the community aspect, because we always try to guess like why are we seeing, like Adam's worked in fitness for decades, Arnold's worked for even more decades, almost more than half a century, and neither of them have seen these type of this volume of transformation where people are losing 50
It's
pounds, 60 pounds,
yeah,
70
it's something
pounds,
else.
130 pounds. And we always talk about what makes it different, because Adam and Arnold have always both put out good workouts. So that's not what it is. And when we talk about it, what Arnold and Adam and I think is we think it's this community that people have a place where they belong and they're part of something bigger than themselves, which you guys all read about in Sahil's book. And that is showing people every day in these weekend schmoozes, like you guys are sharing, not just I had a little win. So, like Sahil's saying, you realize slowly those little wins compound, but you're sharing when bad shit happens to you. And then you're finding out you aren't alone in that. And I think that that's why when we talk about this, like you can lean into that in those periods of loneliness too, because I've never seen anything like the positivity. It makes us all so proud of you guys. Like there's never been anyone who trolled a single person.
It's
We've been
something
live
else.
2 years and we've never had to delete a comment. It's bananas when we say that. It's the internet. Should be chaos. But I'll let Adam close it out.
I think there are two things. One is, I think my buzzword for the last couple of years is the importance of acceptance. And any time you go through something difficult, there's an acceptance that like that period sometimes might last longer than you want. But it's no different when I look at transformation from a physical standpoint, right? We tend to overestimate what we can do in the short term, which leads to a lot of frustration, and underestimate what we can do in the long term. So if we understand that sometimes these points of friction and points of change might take longer than we want, and if we can accept it, it allows us to just stay our path, right? To be the type of person we want to be, to surround ourselves with the type of people we want, and then just be patient enough that if you can stay consistent with that, right? The person who does not quit does not lose. Right. And it's so easy to feel that pressure to lose. And like in the face of adversity, in that face of paying the tax for transformation, it can feel very lonely. But if you can accept that that is part of the process and that it might just take longer, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It can be easier for you to stick with it, to see the outcome. And I think what Daniel was talking about, I think what Sahil, proves so important. And I really think if the five types of wealth is a representation of anything, it's that so much of life is about your ability to increase your surface area for serendipity, right? Sahil has given you all these different tips, but the question that becomes, right, are you consuming the information or are you taking action, as he said earlier? And if you can go ahead and put yourself in the scenarios and situations and the actions and around the people that you want to be around it. If nothing else happens, the one thing that will certainly happen is to realize that like you are not alone in this, right? Whatever struggle you have, whatever hurdle you were trying to overcome, whatever goal you still want to achieve. And hopefully people hear this where you get all these questions where everyone's inspired by Sahil's book, but it's like this path to improve, this path to find the dimmer switch and then understand where you want to put your magnifying glass and then overcome these different fears are universal to all of us. And I think the five types of wealth focus is like if you can use that dimmer switch and use that focus, you can find things that make you feel a little bit better. And then you watch those things compound and life just starts to get better. But it doesn't always mean that it happens as quickly as you want. And I think that's the hardest thing. Patience is something that, we're all told as kids, but I think adults can be far more impatient than children can because like we just expect our efforts to result in what we want more immediately because we're adults, but we need to have that same patience.
You only lose if you give up.
That
Amen.
is the truth.
So
Sahil, Zara, thank you so much for the question. Sahil, I'm gonna kick it to you for any closing thoughts. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we will, guys, if you are watching this on recording, if you are listening in right now, we will without a doubt recap all this, provide links for everything. We're gonna do a recap up and taking little notes over here on main takeaways, and we can provide the workbook. But Sahil, any other thoughts that you have as you either want to leave someone with parting words of wisdom, or as you look back now on the book and the success and what you're going through and writing it, how you look at what you put together?
I would just say my parting wisdom would be um, your entire life can change much faster than you ever thought possible. I mean, this has all been in the last 3-ish years for me. I had never written before. I had never done any of this stuff before. Um, the most incredible opportunities in your life are inherently invisible to you right now. And the only way that you reveal those opportunities is by starting to walk the path. Rumi, the ancient poet, said, "As you start to walk on the way appears." You cannot plan the perfect path. You cannot sit where you are and map it all out perfectly. You just have to start walking. You just have to start taking action, start doing things. The answers you seek are found in the actions that you avoid. So start taking action today. And would love for everyone to reach out, let me know what you're thinking of the book, let me know what you're taking action on. You can send me an email, send me a message. It's me on all of the platforms. I don't have a team managing these things for me. So would love to hear from you. And if you haven't got a copy of the book already, I would love for you to do so, and let me know what you think.
All right. Thank you so much. We can't wait till you're out here with us to train with Arnold.
Oh, I can't wait. I gotta get my bicep game up first, though. I'm gonna work on that for the next couple months.
We all do compared to him.
Yeah. Even at 78, we're all losing to him, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that was definitely, by the way, the highlight of the entire but bestseller experience and everything was just that. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
We can't wait. All right.
Awesome.
Thank
All
you,
right,
man.
guys. Thank
Talk
you.
to you
Appreciate
soon.
it. Take care.
Bye.